I am Evelyn Zumaya, and I am the author of Affairs Valentino. The source for the following short excerpt is Arnold Manillo, the son of Frank Manillo. During my interviews with the Manillo family, they shared this interesting story with me that had never been told. And as with my other source material, I tried to stay as true to the facts of their account as possible. This is again taken from chapter 10. I begin on page 259. During the 1930s, San Francisco's Montgomery Street was a bustling commercial hub. On any given hour during the work week, the thoroughfare was congested with traffic and pedestrians rushing to and from the street's many brokerage houses. Although attention was usually focused on the afternoon's next appointment, a few Montgomery Street passerbys may have glanced up late one afternoon to gasp at the sight of a portly businessman about to be shoved out of a high-rise office window. From the crowd's vantage point on the street below, it would have been impossible to recognize the poor fellow struggling to keep from toppling to his death as the president of the Bank of America. But inside that high-rise window, Frank Manillo was tightening his grip around the leathery neck of banker A.P. Giannini and roaring at full volume, "Bastardo, bastardo." If George Ullman was retreating to his den to cope with the deteriorating situation, Frank Manillo was taking a more hands-on approach. A.P. Giannini landed in his death-defying predicament after Frank and his son Arnold met with one of Giannini's disgruntled employees, George Underhill. Frank spent that afternoon convincing Underhill to jump Giannini's ship and join his organization. As Frank, Arnold, and George Underhill walked the office building's corridors, they made a quick and fateful stop in the men's room. No sooner had the three men entered the restroom than the door swung open again, and A.P. Giannini made the fat mistake of swaggering in. The moment Giannini spotted Frank Manillo, he sensed the imminent threat and whirled around to make his exit. With his hand on the doorknob, he paused to snap back at his mutinous employee, George Underhill. "Don't you think you should be keeping better company, Underhill?" Before Arnold Manillo could make a move to prevent the inevitable, Frank lunged at the suited tycoon. Calling him every foul name he could spit in his direction, Frank grabbed Giannini by the neck, dragged him across the tiled men's room floor, and hefted him up and over the sill of an open window. Arnold was finally able to break his father's grip just long enough to allow Giannini to dash out of the men's room, rubbing his half-broken neck. It was no secret Frank Manillo hated A.P. Giannini. The rift between the two men had grown so fierce that no member of the Manillo family ever stepped foot in any of Giannini's banks. By 1932, Frank had survived some frightfully lean years in California's Central Valley, but he had somehow managed to keep his California Tomato Juice Incorporated solvent. However, Frank blamed Giannini's continuing vendetta against him for most of his business difficulties. Frank terminated his affiliation with the Valentino family upon George's $40,000 loan and then headed north to the San Joaquin Valley to work diligently on his new plant on K Street. But times were tough, and as this was the case with almost everyone else in the country during the Great Depression, Frank was usually short on cash. He was often unable to afford dinners at his residence, the Merced Hotel, and fed himself and his son Arnold by buying a loaf of bread and some olive oil and visiting his tomato growers to, quote, taste the crop. Frank Manillo was not alone in his dire straits. During the first few years after Rudy's death, the cataclysmic downturn of the nation's economy had its unhappy effect upon all the once powerful players in his life. With the exception of the attorneys, no one in this disbanding brotherhood benefited financially from Alberto's prolonged lawsuit against George. While Frank was struggling in Merced and George awaiting a decision from the California Court of Appeals, Alberto continued to petition the court for more cash advances from the dwindling estate funds. He was curtly denied on every occasion, and consequently, at the height of the Depression, he was destitute. Any loyalty A.P. Giannini and Joe Skank might have held for Rudy's only brother had long since waned. And as Giannini's Bank of America eliminated the remnants of Rudy's estate, they did much the same with Alberto. The days of George's generous cash advances were long over, and Giannini was unwilling to advance brother Alberto another penny. He did, however, toss in the job of caretaker of Falcon Lair for the unremarkable remuneration of $35 a month, about $145 less than Lou Mahoney was paid to do the same job many years before. Alberto's benefactor of yesteryear, Joe Skank, could no longer be bothered with the continuing legal travails of Rudy's estate, as he was facing his own Great Depression challenges. In 1933, he and the former head of production at Warner Brothers Studio, Darrell F. Zanuck, founded 20th Century Productions with a loan of $3 million from pal A.P. Giannini. Skank and Zanuck then merged their production company with the floundering Fox Films to form 20th Century Fox Films. As chairman of the 20th Century Fox, Joe Skank still held his powerful seat on A.P. Giannini's Bank of America Board of Directors. It was about this same time that Skank began cozying up to an even more powerful Hollywood ally than Giannini, Willie Bioff. Willie Bioff was a Chicago racketeer and kingpin in the mob shakedown of Hollywood during the 30s. Not long after his arrival in Hollywood, he commanded Joe Skank's full attention. As Skank began engaging in some shady dealings with the organized crime boss, he had no idea federal agents were hot on his movie mogul trail. The source for the story about Giannini and Frank Manillo in the men's room was Arnold Manillo himself, who told this story many times to his family.